Bristol Motor Speedway. We are going to start with today's media availability, and we are joined by Kevin Harvick, driver of the number 4 Busch Beard Ford for Stewart Haas Racing. Winner of 2 of the last 4 races, on a roll. We'll open the floor for questions. If you have a question for Kevin, please raise your hand. We'll get a wireless microphone to you. We're going to start with Ben. You got Jacob.
Kevin, Ben White with the Lexington Dispatch. I just got an easy one for you, or at least I think it's easy to start off. Of all the wins you've had, is there one particular win that stands out as being one that you just really think about and think, boy, that was a great win, of all the ones you've got?
Yeah, for me, it's, I think winning the Daytona 500 is probably the one that sticks out the most. I think that's our sport's biggest race, and it's just a difficult race to win. You see several of our, great past champions and drivers that haven't won that race, and so I was fortunate to win that one, and for me, winning it at Indy was pretty neat, just for me wanting to grow up and being a huge Rick Mears fan, and winning there was neat for me, and then winning the championship race in Homestead. Those would probably be my top 3 if I had to pick.
Jacob?
Jacob Zielman, Speed Sport. Kevin, with this playoff format and everything that goes into being successful in it, obviously you've won a championship under this format. How important is it to do what you guys seem to be doing right now and peaking at the right time? And how important is that momentum that you're building here going to be going into the next 10?
Well, any good momentum, especially from winning, is huge momentum. And, I think for us, you look at last year and probably the best year I've ever had in my career, and not winning the championship, there was probably a few things that go into, not winning the championship. But, I think, you look at the 22 car and, the momentum they had going into the last 10 races was more important at that particular time of the year than what we had done early in the year. So, it's definitely different. There's 2 parts to the season, and obviously to win the championship, you want to be hot at the right time. But winning races also makes the year more tolerable as you go through the first 26. So you'd love to put it all together. Unfortunately, it never seems like it all comes together. Even the year we won the championship in this format, it didn't really all come together until the end of the year, just because we had so many parts failures and things go wrong and building a team at the beginning of the year. But we had fast cars, and we're able to put it all together at the end of the year. So we've been on both sides of it, and you never know what each year is going to bring, especially in a year like this when you have a lot of rule changes and a lot of things that are different. And for me, I didn't really enjoy the change in rules and the change in things, and it took me a few months to get over that and realize that I drive cars for a living and just need to make mine go faster than everybody else's. And I think once we started getting things settled down and getting our cars back to where we needed to be and in the right frame of mind, it was we've got things going in the right direction. So it's been a good few months, really. We've had a chance to win some races that we didn't win as well. So it's been okay.
Go to your right, the Mark.
Mark Garrow, PRN. Kevin, your thoughts on what happened to Dale Jr. yesterday and how sobering it is. You guys fly around a lot. You really, just how sobering was that, or your reaction to what happened yesterday?
Well, first off, I'm just glad that everybody's okay. And I think as you put it all into perspective and you really realize, the amount of time that you spend in an airplane and all the places that you go and things that you do and the amount of time that are required to travel, it's definitely a reminder of things that can happen. But just thank God everybody's okay, because you look at the pictures and all the things that went on. It's amazing that everybody's okay. And in the end, that's the best part of that scenario. Is really no good part of it other than everybody's okay.
When we've had situations like this in the past, everybody has really looked hard at their situation, right? Make sure everything was up to snuff, safety-wise, their procedures and stuff like that. Will it cause you to just double check with your people, like, okay, are we making sure that we're doing always the right things and not taking anything for granted?
I don't really know 100% of the scenario, but, Delaney and I have, we've really tried to not ever take anything for granted on there and overdo the things that we have on that side of the world.
Additional questions for Kevin? We'll go here to Taryn, then we'll go to Kelly.
Taryn Walk, NASCAR.com. You mentioned how different this season is. Is there anything that has surprised you?
Nothing surprises me anymore. You just, I think as you look at the world in general, and you just put our little sport in a little speck of that. I mean, there's really nothing. Dragonflies flying through the media center. You have to be prepared for anything, and it's just like the moment that you get comfortable flying around, something will creep up and grab you. It's no different in the car. I mean, I tell myself after we've done qualifying runs and you think things are going easy, every time I get in the car, you have to make sure you remind yourself to be prepared for the unexpected and make sure that you're ready, because that's when things creep up on you when you expect them the least. So, you try to be open-minded to a number of things, which this is a very open-minded season, just because of all the changes and the things, the way that you race, the way that you set the car up, the way that you go about things is just much different than it ever has been, and I think we've done a good job of adjusting and still have some room, to definitely have to improve some things as we go towards the end of the year, and we all know that, but it's definitely been improving as we go, and leading laps and winning races is where you have to be to win a championship, and hopefully we're getting closer to that.
How long did it take you to adapt this mindset, to be open-minded?
I've been that way for years. That's why I'm still here.
We'll go to Kelly and then to Jerry.
Kelly CrownRacer.com. Kevin, going back to what you said about how obviously the season gets split, right? You have the regular season, and then to win a championship, it's the last 10 weeks. When it comes to this format, you've won the championship under this elimination style format. You've been around though when we used to do it the full season and then the playoffs and how they've changed through the years. This format that we have right now, is it easier to win a championship? Is it harder to win a championship? Kind of how do you look at the style, the format that we have now?
It's different. And that's really the only way that you can explain it, because it's more fun to watch, from a fan's perspective, and I think everybody understands that, and it's no different than any other sport. You have to evolve, and in the end, we are in the entertainment business, and we have to have people watching in order to put sponsors on the car and butts in the seats, and those are the number one priority. So in order to keep up with the times, I mean, you had to keep up with what people think are exciting, and I think the format is exciting. I think it's obviously from a competitor standpoint very intense, and it's hard to get to the Final Four, and so for us it's really once you get into the playoffs, it's more of a survive and advance mentality, and I think however you do that, whether it looks good on paper or not doesn't matter. You just have to get to the next round, and that's much different than collect as many points as you can and try to get to the end of the year as it was previously.
Jerry?
Jerry Jordan, KickinTheTires.net. Real quick, I know last week you had Keelan with you. Y'all spend the summer together. I guess school's fixing to start, but there's an off week. Any plans to do anything? You guys got stuff going on next week?
We have a lot going on, and in the end, though, he's got to get home and get to bed because he's way out of whack. He is definitely not in school form. So we're staying close to home. We'll go ahead and have a lot of things planned, but they'll be in the morning because we have to get to bed because staying up till 9, 10 o'clock traveling around the country is not going to be good for Monday morning school. So we'll make sure that he's prepared for school, and he knows that, and we've had fun, and so I think that the reality of the situation when he has to actually wake up and go to school is when it's not going to be okay. So we'll see how that goes.
We're going to go to your left to Nate and then back to Mark.
Nate Ryan, NBC Sports. Kevin, it seems as if this season is unfolding similar to 2017, where you didn't win until June, and then you made the championship round and were in peak form toward the end of that year. Anything that you guys learned from that year? That was the first year of switching to Ford. I know this is the first year of the Mustang. Anything you guys learned 2 years ago that you've applied now? Does it remind you of that at all?
I asked him how he ran at Bristol the first race on Monday or Tuesday. So I've told you guys this before. I mean, it's short-term memory for me, win or lose. 2017 is great for you guys to talk about, but I have really no recollection of anything that sticks out. It's really week to week, and what can we solve from last week that'll make us better this week, and we'll go back and they put a lot more weight on the first race than I do, just because it's as soon as we're done, I mean it's literally okay, start visualizing the next week and what do I need to do on the racetrack, glance at your notes, and but you can't put too much stock into the notes. But this season is, in the way that you race and the things that you do, are just they're so much different than 2017. I mean, there's obviously experiences and things that you can take from all the different moments, but every season is drastically different, and this one is just the way that you go about things is just it's different than any other year that we've raced. But those experiences of things that we have done in the past are really what allows us to be calm with each other, work together to try to solve problems, and sometimes that's the most intriguing part of what we do. Is the problem solving is different from year to year in how you approach things, but you have to have a very, in my opinion, you have to have a very short-term memory of the things that you are doing and have done, and I try to put as little stock as possible in things that have happened in the past. I know that's not flashy and exciting for your story, but it's just the reality of how we approach things in our narrow-minded little world.
Mark Garrow, PRN. Kevin, looking ahead to Darlington, when you look back at some of this older video and you see some of those cars from an era, whether 70s, 80s, kind of thing, 60s even, ever curious to think like that would have been kind of neat to maybe try those cars or race in that particular era as we look at these throwback weekends?
I think it's intriguing to look back and watch, and obviously that's a cool part of our history, and I think Darlington has done a great job in bringing that story, that conversation, back in, and it's been a great weekend to kind of have those throwback conversations and styles. But for me, and I'm so in the moment of the things that we're doing now, and looking back, I just I try to understand as much of it as I can, but never really. It's kind of like driving an Indy car. I never really had any interest to go back and do something different, because I think it's kind of for me, I'm fortunate to be able to do what I do, and the things that I do are in the now, but watching those old videos and watching those old cars go around the racetrack and realizing how much different the cars were then is very fun to watch, and hearing the story. I'd rather listen to the stories of the guys that drove the cars and worked on the cars, and that to me is very interesting. We had Roger Penske on the radio show, and you forget the knowledge of cars that he has, and knowledge of racing, and the things that the guys that have been around for just 50 years, 60 years in different forms of racing is very interesting for me to listen to. I could have talked to him all day, and we always have good conversation. For whatever reason, he's always liked me, and I've always liked having conversation. But whether it's Roger Penske or Dale Jarrett, doesn't go as far back, but you listen to the old stories of those guys, and Kyle Petty, and the conversations is fun to have, but never really imagined myself being in those cars, because it was never really a reality or a possibility.
When you hear those stories, do you any particular driver kind of stand out? Like, well, that's my kind of guy. You know, when you hear the stories.
Yeah, you know, and I don't remember who I had this conversation with. It might have been Kyle Petty. Might not have been, but it's you know, one guy that is just an interesting topic of conversation that comes up is David Pearson, and the sole reason is the amount of success that he had not racing all the time. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't realize how much better David Pearson's stats would have looked if he would have been in the car as much as everybody else. And it's pretty intriguing to look at those stats and just kind of that guy that just raced and you know, didn't get all the real flashy headlines and things, but in the end he won 105 races. It's pretty good. And not racing all the time. So that to me is just one of the many interesting conversations of our past.
We'll wrap up here with Dustin.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. When you came in, you were part of a generational shift in the sport in that 3 to 5 year period where there's so much driver change. And, you know, thinking back to that period, you know, the veterans are saying these young guys aren't doing it right, and they were changing the sport. As you've reached that veteran level, as you look at the next generation of racers, whether it's this series or even at the short tracks, how do you see the next generation of racers potentially changing the sport and what they're doing that's different from what you've been more accustomed to?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, it's a little bit, when I look at it, it's a little bit different than it was then. You know, you have experiences is so much more valuable now than what it was then because you have so little practice time. Like, you can't just go to the racetrack. When I started, we just went to the racetrack and practiced and tested and practiced and tested. We lived on the road, going to different racetracks and you know, trying to figure it out. So, you know, you can't really do that other than being in the simulator now. And we actually had this conversation on the radio show this week too, just about, you know, the young guys that come in, it takes them a few years to really get their feet on the ground. And you know, in my opinion, you know, it's more tolerated now than what it would have been then because you know, the sponsorships aren't as big. You're not paying the guy as much money because of the fact that you think that if you don't hire him, back then, if you didn't hire him, somebody else would have. You had, you know, 2, 3, 4 options when you were in that generation of teams that you could go to, and you took your pick, and you got paid a reasonable amount. And you know, now it's much lower risk from a financial standpoint, but it's also coming from the Xfinity Series to the Cup Series is much different because, in my opinion, it's not as competitive as it used to be with all the Cup guys in the field. So you're trying to gain that experience on the Cup side while you're actually on the racetrack. You know, Chase is winning races now. We've seen Blaney in victory lane, but it took them a few years. But I can tell you that you know, you have to keep up with the times, and there were a lot of changes. And you know, for me, one of my favorite stories to tell is you know, I was doing all the testing for Earnhardt in 2000. And as we went to the racetrack, and one of my favorite stories is when we took the car to Indianapolis to test that we had been doing all the development work on. He got in it and ran 0.9 of a second faster than what he did in his own car with his standard setups. And they told him what was in the car. He made him put it back in the trailer and told him that he was never driving anything like that. So you can't have that. It was a different type of stubbornness, I guess, when it was that huge change, because I feel like we've slowly gone into, you know, the simulation since 08, 09 and gone to the simulator instead of testing, and so there's many more things that those guys have come into that are more their style from you know, video games and simulators, and so the engineering side is much more in line with you know, the simulation and things like that. But it's just you got to keep up with the times. You can't be so stubborn that you don't keep up with it. But you know, I think there's really no reason that you can't keep racing because of the experience side of things. And I think that leadership and guidance to the team is very valuable. And we'll just have to see, what that is. I mean, obviously, the main player in that is Chase Elliott because of his family's history, and now he's having success, and he's in the conversation for winning a championship, and he's going to be the guy that kind of leads that conversation. But I don't know what it is at this particular point because it's all still all pretty fresh from all those young guys' standpoint.
Kevin, thanks for joining us, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you, guys.